In the summer of 1991, James, a devoted father, and his 9-year-old daughter, Emily, set out on what was supposed to be a memorable road trip. The plan was simple: escape the busy humdrum of everyday life, enjoy the peace of the Pacific Northwest, and create lasting memories as they traveled along the winding highways that cut through forests and picturesque towns. James, with his old but reliable sedan, and Emily, with her excitement about exploring new places, were the perfect pair for a summer adventure. Their journey was filled with laughter, music, and conversations as the two of them drove through endless green landscapes, taking in the beauty of nature. They were on the open road, free and happy. The route was scenic, with planned stops at quaint roadside attractions, small towns, and parks. James and Emily marveled at the mountain views and the charm of the sleepy towns they passed through. It was a father-daughter bond strengthened by the shared experience of travel. However, as the sun began to dip behind the trees and the day grew late, something unexplainable occurred that would forever alter their lives. At some point, while driving through a particularly remote section of the highway, James decided to take a minor detour, a small road that would lead them to an even more secluded spot. He thought it would be a great way to see more of the wild landscapes the Pacific Northwest had to offer. They drove further into the forest, their car slowly winding along an empty, desolate stretch of road, surrounded by nothing but trees and the occasional distant farmhouse. But as the evening darkness settled in, James and Emily disappeared. By the time they failed to show up at their intended stop, worry began to creep in. Their absence was puzzling. A massive search was launched immediately, but despite efforts from local authorities and volunteers, no trace of James, Emily, or their car was ever found. The road they had last been seen on became a haunting, eerie reminder of the mystery that lingered in the air. Their car was never recovered, and every search, whether on foot or with the use of helicopters, led to dead ends. As days turned into weeks, then months, theories started to emerge. Some speculated that they had gotten into a car accident, veering off the road in the dense woods, but no wreckage or signs of an accident were ever discovered. Others thought that perhaps they had wandered too far from the road and had become lost, but again, no evidence of their footsteps or any sign of struggle was found. The possibility of foul play lingered. Was there someone else involved, or had they met with some sinister force? It was a chilling thought that haunted the community for years. The highway where James and Emily had last been seen became a cold, isolated place, with no answers in sight. As the years passed, the search grew colder, and the case gradually faded from the headlines. But for those who had known James and Emily, the questions remained unanswered. Where had they gone? What had happened to them? The mystery seemed insurmountable, leaving the family, friends, and the entire community to wrestle with the haunting question that never seemed to have an answer. As the years passed, the case of James and Emily's disappearance remained an unresolved and painful mystery, gnawing at the hearts of those who had loved them. Investigators tirelessly pursued every lead, following up on tips from concerned locals and scouring the area for any trace of the missing father and daughter. They spoke to witnesses, checked through security footage, and examined weather reports. But with no new evidence emerging, the case eventually went cold. The last known sighting of James and Emily had been at a small gas station just outside a quiet town. A local employee remembered them fueling up and heading off toward the mountains, but after that, no one saw them again. It was as if they had disappeared into thin air. For James's wife, Sarah, the grief was overwhelming. She clung to the hope that, somehow, James and Emily would be found alive, or at least with answers to the questions that haunted her. She kept searching, kept hoping, even as the year slipped by. Each year that passed made it harder to maintain that hope, and the emptiness of not knowing what had happened to her loved ones weighed heavily on her. As the investigation slowed, Sarah struggled with the painful reality that there might never be any answers. Eventually, Sarah remarried. Life, as it often does, moved on in some ways, but the ache in her heart never fully healed. She had learned to smile again, but the absence of James and Emily remained a constant, silent companion. Sarah tried to build a new life, but she never stopped wondering what had happened to her daughter, to the family they once were. The unknown was suffocating. The highway where James and Emily had last been seen, once a vivid part of their memories, faded into the background. The quiet corners of the Pacific Northwest seemed to forget about the two who had once traveled those roads. Over time, fewer and fewer people asked about the case. The search for them was buried under the weight of other mysteries, cold cases, and unanswered questions. For the wider world, the story became just another forgotten tragedy, but for those who had loved James and Emily, the pain was a constant presence. Each passing year, without any clue or closure, added to the ache. The mystery of what had happened to them never left their minds, and the questions lingered. Where had they gone? Why hadn't they returned? The haunting uncertainty remained unanswered in the quiet corners of their lives. Fast forward to 2019, and after nearly 3 decades of unanswered questions, a small construction crew working on a new highway expansion project unknowingly stumbled upon a discovery that would send shockwaves through the investigation. The crew was clearing an area just off the same stretch of road where James and Emily had vanished 28 years earlier, hoping to make way for the new highway. As they worked, one of the crew members noticed an odd patch of disturbed earth. Something didn't seem quite right. The soil was uneven, as if something had been buried there long ago. Curious, the crew member took a closer look and quickly realized that what lay beneath the surface was the remains of a car. The vehicle, partially buried and forgotten by time, was a surprising find in such a remote area. As they continued to uncover the car, it became evident that this wasn't just any abandoned vehicle. It was James's sedan, the very same car that he and Emily had been driving when they disappeared. The realization sent a jolt through the crew, and they immediately reported the discovery to the authorities. What had started as just another routine construction task had now become a pivotal moment in a decades-old mystery. The police arrived quickly, and what they found inside the car was even more shocking. The vehicle, though partially buried and covered in a thick layer of dirt and vegetation, was in remarkably good condition. The car had been hidden with care, as if someone had deliberately placed it there to keep it from being found. But it wasn't just the car's condition that raised questions, it was the items found inside. Among the belongings were items that immediately matched the descriptions of James and Emily. There was Emily's backpack, still intact despite the years of burial, as well as a few of James's personal belongings. But what truly stunned the authorities was the discovery of an old family photo, carefully placed on the dashboard. The photo was of James, Emily, and Sarah, smiling together on a happier day, a heart-wrenching reminder of the life that had been lost. The discovery raised more questions than it answered. The car had been buried in a way that suggested someone had gone to great lengths to conceal it. Why was the vehicle hidden, and why had it been left there for so long? Never discovered until now. For the first time in nearly 3 decades, the case seemed to have a new lead, and for the first time in years, hope sparked that the mystery of James and Emily's disappearance might finally be solved. But the road ahead was still uncertain, and the answers were just beginning to unfold. The police immediately launched a thorough investigation into the discovery of James and Emily's car, hoping to uncover any details that could explain how it had remained hidden for so long. Upon closer inspection, they realized that the area where the car had been found was largely inaccessible. It was a remote, hard-to-reach spot, off the beaten path and far from any major roads. The terrain surrounding the area made it difficult for vehicles to access, and the dense forest provided a natural barrier. It seemed as though the car had been deliberately driven into this isolated area out of sight and away from any public view. The fact that it had been buried so deeply suggested a calculated move, as if someone had gone to great lengths to ensure it would remain concealed. As investigators delved deeper into the circumstances surrounding James and Emily's disappearance, they uncovered a series of unsettling clues. The stretch of highway that James and Emily had been traveling on was known to be remote, often bypassed by travelers, and had very few regular commuters. The route was perfect for someone with ill intentions, as it offered isolation and anonymity. A few of the workers from the construction crew who had been involved in clearing the area shared their recollections of unusual activity in the area decades ago. They had heard rumors of strange occurrences in that part of the highway, but at the time, they had thought little of it. In hindsight, they realized that the activity they had noticed might have been related to something far darker. Forensic analysis of the car and the surrounding area revealed even more alarming details. The investigators found that the burial of the car wasn't a result of an accident or a random incident. It was intentional. There were no signs of an accident, no skid marks, and no indication that the car had crashed. Instead, it appeared to have been carefully driven off the road and concealed. As the investigation continued, they also discovered traces of human activity in the area nearby, footprints that didn't belong to James or Emily, tire tracks leading away from the burial site, and remnants of a campsite, suggesting that someone else had been there recently. This discovery was crucial. It became clear that James and Emily had not been alone in the final days of their lives. With these new findings, the investigation took a dramatic turn. The police began to suspect that the disappearances of James and Emily were not the result of a tragic accident, as originally believed, or simply a case of them getting lost. Someone had orchestrated their disappearance. The hidden car, buried in such a remote and isolated location, was no longer just a tragic reminder of a family's loss. It was now the key to unlocking the mystery that had haunted their loved ones for decades. The search for answers had entered a new phase, and the possibility of uncovering the truth seemed closer than ever. After months of investigation and meticulous forensic analysis, the truth behind James and Emily's disappearance finally began to emerge. The breakthrough came when investigators traced the tire tracks found near the car's burial site to a man named Frank. Frank was a former criminal with a long history of ties to underground activities in the area, and his presence around the time of James and Emily's disappearance raised alarms. Frank had been seen lurking near the highway where James and Emily were last known to have traveled, and further investigation revealed his involvement in a series of illegal operations that had never fully been uncovered. As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that James and Emily had unknowingly stumbled upon a criminal operation while they were traveling. Frank, whose illegal dealings had been taking place in the remote areas surrounding the highway, saw an opportunity when he encountered James and Emily. It wasn't clear whether the two had been targeted from the start or if their meeting with Frank was purely coincidental, but what was soon uncovered was chilling. Frank had taken them hostage for a short period, holding them in a secluded area far from the road. The investigation revealed that Frank had let James and Emily go after some time, perhaps believing they wouldn't be able to identify him or connect him to the crime. However, in a panic to cover his tracks and ensure the car wasn't linked to him, Frank had made a critical decision. He buried it. The car, with all its contents, including the personal belongings of James and Emily, was hidden in an isolated area, far from any roads and out of sight. This was done not out of malice toward the father and daughter, but as a means of preventing the vehicle from becoming evidence against Frank's illegal activities. The mystery that had plagued the family for nearly 3 decades had finally unraveled, and the truth about James and Emily's disappearance came to light in the most unexpected of ways. The buried car, long forgotten by time and hidden in the dirt, had been the key to solving the case. For Claire and Lily, this revelation brought both sorrow and closure. The pain of knowing that James and Emily had been caught in a tragic, unforeseen situation was overwhelming, but at least now they had the answers they had been searching for. The family could begin the healing process, knowing that the mystery had been solved and the truth had been revealed. The journey that James and Emily had taken ended in a way no one could have imagined, but it also brought a sense of justice and peace to their memory. The case was closed, and finally, their story was given the justice it had long deserved.